Well, good evening, folks. It's your old friend, Mr. Zen 1010 down in Hollandale, Florida, coming to you live. I had another story I wanted to start in on here. Get off the cannibal in Miami tale for a moment and get on something a little different. I wonder if any of you people remember, as I pan around to myself here, do you remember that about 2 to 3 years ago, we had an airplane that was lost out over the Atlantic Ocean, and when I say lost, man, they were lost, disappeared right off the radar screen. They were in an Air France Airbus aircraft, which is noted for flying fly-by-wire, or it's automated, totally automated flight, autopilot, if you will. In other words, the aircraft is able to take itself off and do cruise flight, climb out, cruise flight, and land, and do the approach, land the airplane, do most everything by use of the autopilot. And they trust the autopilot so much that the pilots really don't have to worry too much about flying it, according to the people who train the pilots at Air France. Now, last night, I was sitting and watching a special on Flight 447. 2 years ago, it left South America en route on a non-stop, about a 10-hour flight, over to Paris, France. Now, what happened is the captain, this is a very normal thing, and I'm an ex-airline pilot. I've been flying almost all my life, and I had no idea this stuff was going on. But the captain had left the flight deck and left two other pilots in the flight deck area, and the pitot tubes, which are responsible for a number of flight instrument readings, the airspeed and the pressure differences. Sometimes they're used for altimeter readings and that sort of thing to give you altitude readouts. They were iced over or malfunctioned in some way, which is set up to kick the autopilot offline. Now, when the autopilot was kicked offline, these two co-pilots that were up in the cockpit area were unable to fly the airplane. The lady that was doing the story from, I believe it was Nightline, was sitting in a simulator so that she could get the feeling of what actually happened in this particular airplane, and she was listening to the flight recorder, which they have just recovered. The people who found the Titanic found this airplane in the Atlantic Ocean. After a long search, they finally found it, and lo and behold, the cockpit voice recorders, flight data recorders were working, and so they got the whole story about what was going on in this airplane. How bizarre. The gentleman she was talking to either was a training pilot with Air France or knows all about aircraft pilot training in the, I believe it's the A330 Airbus. He made the statement that they trust the autopilot so much that they didn't visit crew member training of how to actually fly the aircraft by hand. Now, I've never heard of anything so bizarre in my whole life. How would you like to get on an airplane with about 200 or 300 other people and know that the pilots have no idea how to fly the airplane? They're good computer operators, and the computers will fly it, but they don't know how. And it's been proven that this is exactly what happened in this big airplane. They're at about 30,000 feet, 37,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean, and the co-pilot, very basic stuff, pulled the nose back when the autopilot disengaged and put the airplane in a stall. In other words, there was not enough air flowing over the flight controls and the surfaces of the airplane's controls to keep it flying, and so the airplane just falls out of the sky. Now, this airplane is falling out of the sky, and the captain takes him about a minute and a half to get back up into the cockpit, He was traveling with a friend of his that's a flight attendant, and they may have been, who knows where they were or what they were doing. But when he came in the cockpit, he said, "What's going on up here?" And they were all like, you know, this was on the flight recorder. "What's going on up here?" And they said, "We don't know what's happening here." And here you've got two pilots that are actually pulling in different directions on the yoke of the aircraft, the rudder pedals and everything else, pushing on the throttles, had no earthly idea what to do. To make a long story short, this airplane sank belly first in a deep stall all the way from 37,000 feet and hit the water and disintegrated into a lot of pieces, and all those people were killed. Now, what in the world do they mean that they don't teach the pilots how to fly these aircraft? They rely on the autopilots to do it, so they don't worry about training the pilots to fly. Mr. Zen 1010, more on this story later, as I'm sure there'll be more developments on it. But man alive, what's going on? The guy said that was flying the airplane. What's going on is you killed 228 people. You don't know how to fly, and you are a first officer on a big Airbus, and you don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to fly. Good night of living. Good night, folks. Zen 1010 with another one of these bizarre stories. It's a good thing they didn't eat each other up there in that cockpit. Good night, folks, and say hello to the stars above. The stars above. Hop along, Casamadonio, Shady Bobby.